tall trees, lovely. Got Kathy with some bird feeders. George, it is your cat. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Benjamin sees some beautiful trees in the park. We got Stephanie here, music and movement, lovely. A blown glass hummingbird feeder, lovely, I can see that. Hey Mike, how you doing? Hi Elizabeth, music and art, beautiful blue skies, thank you. We've got Jade here. Jade Lamb is one of our Lifetime Arts trainers, and today she's going to be here as a facilitator of our small group conversation. And her art form is Chinese brush painting. She's calling from New York City, and she looks out the window at some beautiful trees. Clark, my co-trainer here, he sees his red-nosed pit bull named Aunt Trudy. Sounds like Aunt Trudy needs a book written about her. Great, with John, collaborative murals, beautiful, an ocean view, baby geese eating my garden. Great, Ty Tracy, Delaware, literary, music, sky yarn. I like that image. Hi, Gary. Great. You're in your basement music studio. Many instruments and a little bit of sun. That sounds like a nice combo. Daniela Del Giorno is here. She's also from Lifetime Arts, a trainer. She's going to facilitate some conversations today. She teaches ballroom and Latin dance, and she can see a beautiful blue sky this morning. Hey, Amanda. Metalsmith. Awesome. You see some kids playing. We got Mike here from Milford Art. I'd love to hear more about your art. Hey, Paul. Hi, Paul. Theater music artist and also director of Delaware Division of the Arts. You see the Delaware Memorial Bridge out the window, very cool. And Ernie here's modern dance, Kayano type artist. If I'm saying that right? I'd love to hear more about that at some point. Calling in from PA. Hey, Catherine, ocean writer in North Wilmington, green grass and flowering shrubs. Hi, Lisa. Tracy, you see sky outside the window and see yarn near the window. I get it. Okay, thank you. Lisa's here, a musician in Philadelphia. Hey, Michael, you work in cardboard. I love it. And Linda is calling in from Newark. Sees birds at your feeders. And you work in papercraft. Keep those coming. I just love to get a sense of who is in our space. We'll have a lot more time to sort of get to know each other, but that's our quick way in. So thanks so much, and keep those intros coming. I'm just going to pass it to my co-trainer, Clark Jackson, for a second.
Good morning. Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's creative aging training. Before we get started, we want to go over a few housekeeping items. We ask for your full participation and engagement during the session, just as if we were able to be together in person. To fully participate in today's session, there are a few things to know about the Zoom protocol. Lifetime Arts will be sharing our screen like you're seeing now. For the best view during today's session, we recommend that you use the side-by-side viewing mode. You can find this by clicking the View Options drop-down menu at the top of your screen, next to the lime green button that says, "You are viewing Galia's screen." Click the drop-down arrow and select side-by-side mode. In this mode, you should be able to adjust how big the slide is and have the option to make it smaller so you can see people's videos and vice versa. You could change the view of who you see in this mode by selecting either gallery view or speaker view on the top right of your screen. We ask that you keep yourself muted unless you are otherwise directed to eliminate distractions and any background noise. We ask that you also keep your camera on so that we can see one another as if we were in the same room. To adjust either of these settings, you can click on the microphone or camera icons on the bottom left of your screen. A slash through the icons means that you're either muted or your camera is turned off. We also ask that you take the time right now to rename yourself on Zoom so people know your full name and the art forms you work in: visual art, performing, literary, etc. You can also add your preferred pronouns if you wish. You can do so by clicking on the Participants tab and clicking on the button More to the right of your name. You should see a drop-down menu with the option Rename. Go ahead and take a moment to do that right now. All right. If you have questions or comments during the session at any time, feel free to type your comment in the chat function to everyone. You'll find the chat icon at the bottom of your screen in the middle of the toolbar. A staff member will see your chat and will do their best to read aloud your question or call on you during the Q&A portions of the sessions as time allows. Please note that throughout the 3 days of training, breakout room group discussions will be used often, so please be ready to fully participate. If you'd like to save the chat from today's session, you can do so by opening the chat box and clicking on the 3 dots on the bottom right. Select Save Chat and the entire chat will be saved to your computer. Finally, if you want to see closed captioning, press on the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and turn it on to show. If you're having trouble seeing the CC button in the toolbar at the bottom of your Zoom window, try expanding to full screen mode and then hovering your pointer at the bottom of your window. Your toolbar should pop up and the CC button should appear to the left of your reactions button. Thanks for participating fully in these remote trainings. If you run into any technical issues, please message Galia Eden directly through the chat. Also, a little bit more analog, please have a paper or notebook and pen or marker available for some activities today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Clark. So that's just taken us through the way we'd like to interact on Zoom today. But I just wanted to make sure everybody, again, I'm Julie Klein. I'm the Education Associate at Lifetime Arts. I'm here with Clark Chen, Lifetime Arts Trainer, and we've got Jay, Daniela, Annie, and Galia Eden all here from Lifetime Arts to support you and also facilitate our breakout groups when we get to that. So great. And the next thing I wanted to do was also introduce the folks that are here today from the Delaware Division of the Arts. We have Kristen Pleasanton, who's the Deputy Director. We have Sheila Ross from Arts Education and Accessibility. And we have Paul Regraff here, the Director of the Division of the Arts. So I wasn't sure folks who wanted to say hello, but we would love your welcome as well.
Well, I'd be happy to say hello, jumping in, because I can't stay on for long. I'm afraid I got some other calls coming in. Just want to thank everybody participating in this workshop, the series of workshops. I think it's a really exciting opportunity for all of you and for us to help to support you in your professional development and to expand your capabilities in creative aging and teaching, working with the libraries. I think this partnership is a really exciting one with some great prospects for opportunities for you, for our older citizens, and for expanding the programming that we do in partnership with the libraries. I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Kristen Pleasanton for really spearheading this whole initiative by writing the grant that is making this possible through the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies and Aroha Philanthropies. So thank you, Kristen, and thank you all of you teaching artists, and thank you for everyone at Lifetime Arts for leading these workshops.
Great, thank you so much. It's already been an incredible collaboration with Delaware Division of the Arts. Kristen, did you want to say anything? No, I don't want to cut you off. Okay, great. And I know Kristen and I believe Sheila are coming back on day 3 as well, so we can talk even more in depth about this initiative. So if you teaching artists will be well prepared for all aspects of this exciting project. But first, for our training, we wanted to go over, we're going to cover a lot of ground over these 3 days, so we kind of wanted to give you a quick preview. Basically, our goal for the whole training is to introduce you to the creative aging field. And go over all aspects of designing and implementing programs. Our agenda for this first day is here on the slide. The goals for this first day of the training are that you will be introduced to the creative aid field. We're going to analyze ageism and its impact on program design and delivery. We're also going to talk a lot about older adult learning principles and learn how we can structure lessons that really meet the need and engage the creative spirit of older adults. And I just want to give you a preview of our next 2 days together. Tomorrow, we're all going to actually take part in an online creative aging class. And we're going to discuss even more how we design the specific program design for these kinds of programs. And on Wednesday, we're going to be actually starting to envision our own creative aging programs. And we're going to talk a lot about partnering with older adult communities and curriculum development. But first, today, we're going to dive right in and have a real experiential exploration of ageism to generate dialogue and also to become aware of how ageism is present in our own lives and how it might impact the way that we design programs for older adults. So I want to first take a second, take a moment, sit down nice in your chair, put your feet on the ground, look away from the screen for a second and really check in with yourself. I want to ask you today, in this moment, what age do you feel like on the inside? Just right now, not how you felt 5 minutes ago, not how you're going to feel tonight, but really in this moment, if you check in with your body, your mind, what age, what feels like your internal age right now? And when you sort of feel like you're circling around a number, whatever number that might be, I want you to take that piece of paper you've got or your notebook and kind of as big as possible on the page, go ahead and write that number down. Just your internal age today. If you've got a marker, that would be cool. Write that nice and big. Cool. And Golly, I'm gonna ask that you stop sharing slides. Good, so we can all see each other pretty well. Good, and Daniela's already doing it. I'm gonna ask that you hold up that number in the screen as close as you can to your camera so I can see. Okay, great, cool. I see Catherine has 50, Daniela 38, Elizabeth 40, Annie I see is 65. Great, I wanna see. Okay, Joanne, I think I know what you mean and I want to ask you about it. Great, I see Benjamin with the 40, Ethel with a 19. Okay, cool. Go ahead and put those down. So Joanne, I feel like my impulse was that you had the infinity symbol on is that true?
That's right.
Okay, great. Let's start there. What about how you felt in this moment felt like infinity to you?
When I was registering for some webinar the other day, I can't even remember what it was, but probably something literary. There were age boxes, and they were in groups. And the next to last one probably said something like 45 to 64, and then the very last one said 65 plus. So this is the first year I checked 65 plus, and I thought, well, that just means in 65 to infinity. like I'm just like ageless now, like I get to go forever now because there's no box after me. So that's how I'm feeling.
It's kind of maybe an amazing vista to be sitting now. You're 65 plus. What could that plus possibly be? Great.
Yes, everything comes after or nothing comes after.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
It's like, so the ageism view would be like, that's the end of the line.
That somehow whoever wrote that, and many people do, like put 55 plus, could not envision anything beyond. They had no imagination of what came after 65. That's really fascinating. Cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's the first time I don't know about you, Annie, but I've ever seen someone write the infinity symbol in this exercise, and I think I might steal it. Great. I saw Ethel in my screen. I saw she had 19. Yeah, Ethel. Do you want to unmute yourself and talk about that? Why in this moment, what to you said 19? Any luck with the unmuting? There we go.
I don't know. I've just always, that's just how I feel inside. I don't feel like I ever grew up.
Cool. And so it does, say more about what 19 means to you. What does that mean to you, that number?
Well, it's sort of, I guess, ageless. And I mean, I don't feel like I'm almost 68 years old. I don't I just don't see that. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I see it in the mirror, but I don't feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Or
And
maybe I
19,
don't feel what other people expect someone my age to feel. Maybe that's what it is.
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
So you're associating what you imagine other people think is 65
right.
and that you don't identify with.
Yeah.
Okay. I also feel like you're saying something about some part of you is still 19. Like there's something about 19 that for you, you feel like you've
Yeah.
held on to. Is that true?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Cool. I'd love to hear when we have more time, what happened, when you were 19. But great. Cool.
Hancock
Somebody
song, 19.
say again, Clark.
There's that great Herbie Hancock song, 19.
Yeah. Maybe that's the reference we need. So anyone else want to share, let me ask you, was there something surprising about the number that you came up with when you checked with yourself? You could raise your hand yeah, Ashley, I see your hand.
So I didn't follow the instructions, and instead of writing a number, I wrote the word present. And as I was really trying to figure out a number, I kept settling on my current right now age, which is 38. But I still have moments where I'm a 5-year-old me with a rainbow bathing suit and a pair of snow boots and a Burger King crown. And there's times when I'm my 19-year-old me trying to like salvage that last moment of teenagehood before that, that serious transition. And like I just distinctly remember a quarter life crisis when I turned 25, and then like being really okay with 30. So I feel like each of those moments have been so monumental to where I am right now. And so I've kind of needed, especially as a dancer, and recognizing that my body doesn't do the things that it used to do at those younger ages, and just kind of really needing to breathe into that and be fine with it. And so just to kind of be like, today I'm now years old and just kind of needing to be in that space. So I did
love
not
that.
follow
I love say again.
just that I did not follow the instructions at all.
As often happens, you didn't follow the instructions, and so so there's something more illuminating that you came to, right? That often happens in art classes or arts classes. Lovely. So I feel like you said a lot, Ashley, but what I really heard you say was that we are all the ages we've ever been, right? And often where something sort of monumental happened to us personally, like we feel that age more, right? But what might be 30 to you might be very different 30 to me, might be different, Elizabeth's 30 or John's 30. Like we bring so much of our own associations to these numbers. Or like Ethel said, we bring what we think somebody else's perception of the number is to our perception of the number, right? It starts getting very so strange and complicated. But I think important to realize is the numbers are just numbers. And any associations are really kind of our own, or of course we have to acknowledge societies, right? Or the medias, or, there's a lot of messages we're getting, but I think a lot too are really our own. And once we start to recognize how subjective, we start to realize like the numbers themselves don't have a lot of actual meaning, is often what I think. Okay, great, thank you. The great sharing. This is one less conversation, but Clark's gonna take us into our next exploration on this.
So what is ageism? I'm going to bring up the slide. Great. From the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, ageism is prejudice or discrimination against a particular age group, and especially the elderly. This section will be our opportunity to explore what ageism means in our lives. But first, we're going to hear from Ashton Applewhite about ageism, and later we'll work together to define and talk about its impact.
So 1 second before then, Clark, I do just want to stop us and something else that I'd love for us to think about is what are some ageist things that you have heard, maybe that you've said, that are often said in popular culture, right? One that I always say that like seemingly is positive, but is like, old people are also cute, right? Or old people are so wise, right? And so it's positive, but it's a cliche, again, based on one's age, which we were just talking about is super subjective. So Annie put in senior moment. So go ahead and if any of these that come up, if you want to put them into the chat. Right, so senior moment. And if you saw Ashton's video, the full video before today, you saw that she said, you know, well, when I forgot something when I was a teenager, why didn't I call it a junior moment? Great, age for beauty. Joanne, okay, boomer. What's that mean, Joanne? That's like someone's like, okay, boomer, like they're reacting to you. I don't know if you want to give any more explanation. Stephanie says, an old person saying, don't ever get old. That's so interesting. Yeah, that's sort of, that is of course expressing their opinion, their experience, right? But it is making a judgment that we're all gonna feel bad as we get older, right? Which might not be the case. Calling older people sweetie, for sure. Thank you, Catherine. The golden years. Yeah, that is such an interesting image. Black don't crack. Thank you, Tracy. Yes. Age is just a number. Got that, sweetie. Yep. What is she's 65 years old or she's 8 years old. She should know better. Yeah. Like we can make that comment about any age, right? Or she should know better. She's 80 years young. Thanks, Joanne. Can't teach an old dog new tricks. Playing on the back nine. I don't know if I've heard, I guess I have heard that. Clark, using ma'am or sir, right. Some of these terms can be perceived as respectful, right? But sometimes somebody calls you ma'am and you're like, I don't know how I feel about that. Sucks getting old. Over the hill, right. Yeah, that's a really negative image, right? Now it's like, now we're cresting downward. Old people is defining and prejudiced in itself. Thank you, Lisa, for sure. I've earned all these ache pains. Nice. Using old G or auntie. Senior citizens, the elderly. Yep, there's a lot of different terms, different feelings about different terminology. Getting old is not for the faint of heart. There's no way you're a grandma. Right, well then what should a grandma look like? You don't look 40, there's a 40 isn't bad, right? The same thing, oldies but goodies. These are great, yes, keep them coming. And as we're saying too, a cliche is not necessarily just a negative. Things we perceive as positive can also be extremely cliched comments. Okay, great, yeah, Clark, so please take us into the next section.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep.
So moving on, Ashton Applewhite is the author of This Chair Rocks, a manifesto against ageism, and the spokesperson for a movement to mobilize against discrimination on the basis of age. In 2016, she joined the PBS site Next Avenue as their Influencer of the Year for her expertise on ageism. Now let's hear what she has to say about growing older. A reminder, if you put the shared screen in side-by-side mode, you can adjust the size of the video so you can see it bigger, using the bar between the video and participant videos. Here we go.
What's one thing that every person in this room is going to become? Older. And most of us are scared stiff at the prospect. How does that word make you feel? I used to feel the same way. What was I most worried about? Ending up drooling in some grim institutional hallway. And then I learned that only 4% of older Americans are living in nursing homes, and the percentage is dropping. What else was I worried about? Dementia. Turns out that most of us can think just fine to the end. Dementia rates are dropping too. The real epidemic is anxiety over memory loss. I also figured that old people were depressed because they were old and they were going to die soon. It turns out that the longer people live, the less they fear dying, and that people are happiest at the beginnings and the ends of their lives. It's called the U-curve of happiness, and it's been borne out by dozens of studies around the world. You don't have to be a Buddhist or a billionaire. The curve is a function of the way aging itself affects the brain. So I started feeling a lot better about getting older, and I started obsessing about why so few people know these things. The reason is ageism, discrimination and stereotyping on the basis of age. We experience it anytime someone assumes we're too old for something, instead of finding out who we are and what we're capable of, or too young. Ageism cuts both ways. All isms are socially constructed ideas: racism, sexism, homophobia, and that means we make them up, and they can change over time. All these prejudices pit us against each other to maintain the status quo, like auto workers in the US competing against auto workers in Mexico instead of organizing for better wages. We know it's not okay to allocate resources by race or by sex. Why should it be okay to weigh the needs of the young against the old? All prejudice relies on othering, seeing a group of people as other than ourselves, other race, other religion, other nationality. The strange thing about ageism, that other is us. Ageism feeds on denial, our reluctance to acknowledge that we are going to become that older person. It's denial when we try to pass for younger, or when we believe in anti-aging products, or when we feel like our bodies are betraying us simply because they are changing. Why on earth do we stop celebrating the ability to adapt and grow as we move through life? Why should aging well mean struggling to look and move like younger versions of ourselves? It's embarrassing to be called out as older until we quit being embarrassed about it. And it's not healthy to go through life dreading our futures. The sooner we get off this hamster wheel of age denial, the better off we are. Stereotypes are always a mistake, of course, but especially when it comes to age, because the longer we live, the more different from one another we become, right? Think about it. And yet, we tend to think of everyone in a retirement home as the same age, old. When they can span 4 decades, can you imagine thinking that way about a group of people between the ages of 20 and 60? When you get to a party, do you head for people your own age? Have you ever grumbled about entitled millennials? Have you ever rejected a haircut or a relationship or an outing because it's not age appropriate? For adults, there's no such thing. All these behaviors are ageist. We all do them, and we can't challenge bias unless we're aware of it. Nobody's born ageist, but it starts in early childhood, around the same time attitudes towards race and gender start to form, because negative messages about late life bombard us from the media and popular culture at every turn, right? Wrinkles are ugly. Old people are pathetic. It's sad to be old. Look at Hollywood. A survey of recent
All right. We're now going to have further discussions in the breakout rooms about the video and your perspectives on aging and ageism.
All right.
You ready to jump in?
Ready to go into these breakout rooms.
Let's go. Are very deep. They are very personal. So I hope it's just starting the conversation, with you all. But I did want to invite some of the different facilitators to share what was shared. So Annie, can I start with you? Would you share from your group?
Sure. Yes, we'd love to share. We had a great conversation. Really, what we really thought about too is one of the things that came up around the video was this dynamic of the isms and the real realization that ageism is something we all share. We don't all share in the same perspectives around a lot of the isms that happen in the world. It depends on who you are and all sorts of reasons behind that. But we are all growing older. And so there's a uniting piece of that and an understanding around that we all have to kind of come together to fight this thing and to be aware of this thing. Another piece of this too was really understanding the adjustment of capacity as we age. And so to look at like a changing body as an opportunity potentially and changing how you approach things, which was really neat. And I really loved, and I'm just to close into the finish of our conversation, was that we definitively have worries about getting older and our changing bodies. But again, what does that mean in terms of opportunities for learning? That it doesn't always have to be, that active maybe doesn't always have to be physically active, but what does engagement and connection mean in terms of active and what it means to be part of a community?
Cool, very cool. Thank you for that. Yeah, we had a lot of crossover in our group. Clark, do you want to share from your group just a couple takeaways?
Sure, we had so many things. Learning how to embrace change as a positive part of not only growing older, but from the kind of, I guess, adult side of things, but going from infancy into childhood. It's all a part of a continuum. And where in there arbitrarily does it all of a sudden change get bad? You know what I'm saying? And looking at that. And in terms of ageism, kind of thinking about, you know, how people are doing that to others and to themselves through their language, through their perspectives, through their mindset, through their behavior. We talked about the good side of getting older and things that people don't necessarily do anymore, like drink themselves under the table 4 nights a week because they've had changes in their lives, whether that be due to getting older or the things that tend to come up like families and children and stuff like that as you go through life. A higher quality alcohol, being sure that the club has got a place to sit down for those rest breaks. You know what I'm saying? That's what it is. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. That might lead
Very
you
key.
you know, fancier crowds, you know, and more sophisticated kind of opportunities for, you know, interrelations. What else? What are the
Want to give us one more?
Yeah, I'll say that Mr. Benjamin had so many wonderful things to say about his mother as a shining example of defying ageism. The woman changed his oil, fixes his car, plasters, does all kind of stuff. I'm gonna holler at him later because I got this new house and a few repairs I need to get doing. You know what I'm saying? So he was like busting out on Mom Dukes and she stays up partying till 5 and 6 in the morning. And like, she is just really doing it big. And I talked about my mom being 78 and wearing sexy clothes and being out playing, you know, pickleball and tennis. And Amanda talked about her parents and them playing pickleball and how they're a great example of staying active and not letting yourself slip into, oh, well, I'm older. And so no, keep it up, keep going if that's what you want to do. So we had a lot to share.
Wonderful. Lots of fantastic parents in that group. I can't wait to hear more. Thank you, Clark. Daniela, I wanted to bring you up, share from your group.
Sure. We had a lot of nice conversation, although very quick conversation, I would say, with this group. I wanted to touch upon something that I thought Catherine said was very interesting. She had a friend who, Catherine, I believe he was in a wheelchair, and he called everybody else temporarily abled. And that was very poignant to me, that we're all just temporarily abled in various degrees. And it depends, you know, really your perspective and where you come from. We spoke a little bit about kind of things you wouldn't do as you know, now at your age that maybe you consider doing or not doing. And of course that went from maybe wearing clothes that you might think people will think something about you, and sharing a story about maybe seeing a coworker wear her daughter's clothes and thinking maybe that's inappropriate, right? But then what is that saying if that just happens to be your style? We did have a lot of, and also something that maybe things we wouldn't do now that we're older, going hiking or surfing. Joanne mentioned she wouldn't go by herself anymore. One, just for safety reasons, but just two, it's more fun to share that with somebody than to do those things alone. So I think that's certainly a positive. And then lastly, I would say, as far as having good role models, we had some good role models with everyone pretty much being associated with someone who over the age of 90 either remarried, took a road trip to Las Vegas. Also, we had, I think it was Joanne's grandfather over 90 took a turn on a tractor trailer and came out unscathed. So
Wow.
really great role models kind of floating around as to what it is to age differently and to think of it more in a positive way.
Great. Thank you, Daniela. Cool. Wonderful. Jade, and from your group real quick.
Yes, we talked about even in our daily lives with our families, there are some ageist behavior that we might not be aware of. For example, Mom, I don't think you should be wearing that. Or I don't want to wear this sweater because Grandpa has one. So these are, some little things that we noticed. And we also talked about some of our older adults in our lives. They do amazing things. For example, Michael mentioned that he has a friend who is 80, who was 87 years old. He was retired, and he was a driver, and then he was being called back by his company because he's so good at what he did, and he started working again. And now he is I believe 96, and he is still very active. So that's one very good example that, older people still work, and they work very hard. And another thing that we touched upon is during this pandemic, we realized that a lot of older adults explore different new things to do, a lot of different creative activities. So that's one positive thing about this pandemic, is to allow us to see what we can possibly do. I like Tracy's comment that people choose joy. So a lot of people choose to do different things because it makes them happy. And also art spirits is very important. Art spirits is for different age. You're not, limit to a certain age if you want to do art. So that's one very amazing thing about learning art.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jade. Yes, I want to wrap us up, but I did want to say we had some great connections in our group to the curve of happiness. Delona said she really identified with that and felt like the last 10 years, as she's getting older, she is definitely getting happier, and she felt very connected. And I wanted to bring up the idea, like Jade was just saying, about creativity, and creativity really being an opportunity to see yourself differently. That I know Linda, in her experience working with folks with disabilities, that often this idea of being only a recipient of services can start to make you feel like that is all you are, is somebody that receives help and services. And creativity is super empowering and allows you to determine how you want to be out in the world and how you want your voice to be heard. And that's a really wonderful use of arts programs for any age, but especially for older adults. Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you, facilitators, for facilitating and sharing. This conversation, as I said, is definitely ongoing. As thoughts occur to you, new examples, new things you want to bring up, please put them in as we continue on our training. But first of all, I wanted to give us all a break. We have a full 5-minute break available to you all. That will be, Gali will play music. But I did want to invite you in 3 minutes from now. Claire's actually going to lead a little stretch break. So if you want to come back for that, that'll be in 3 minutes. So at 11:05 will be the stretch break, and we will fully start the training back at 11:07. Thanks so much.
Go. So take a nice inhale and exhale as you reach up, 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 and over to your right with your arms while pushing your hips and legs out to the left. Make sure you get lots of space between your head and your shoulders, and the other direction. Keep breathing. Lots of space between your head and your shoulders. Open up fully to the side. Up on the left with your arms and out to the right. Breathing into it with your hips and legs. And let's go around in a circle with that while breathing. Be sure you do a full circle. Now the other direction. Engage your whole bodies. All right. Roll those shoulders back and back and back and forward and forward and forward. And we're going to reach up, 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 up and roll down and go all the way down. Bend your knees slightly. And on the count of 10, we're going to roll up, but keep your shoulders relaxed. And most important, keep your neck relaxed so that your head is the last thing to come up. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, woo, woo, woo. All right. I think we're good and we can move on into it. Are we at 11:07? Yes, we are. Welcome back, everybody. So we're now going to dig into the creative aging arts education model so that you have a clear understanding of the goals for these types of programs for older adults. So why is everybody talking about aging? Well, worldwide, the population is aging due to falling fertility rates. People are having fewer children and rising longevity. Put simply, people are generally living longer, healthier lives. Now, we want to acknowledge that COVID-19 is projected to reduce life expectancy for older adults by about 1 year, according to the official journal of the National Academy of Sciences. Overall, though, according to the US Census Bureau, starting in 2030, older Americans will make up 21% of the population, up from 15% today. And by 2034, the number of adults aged 65 and older will outnumber those under the age of 18. This demographic shift is not a temporary situation, but is a permanent shift towards an older population. Additionally, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, as well as lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals constitute a significant and rapidly growing portion of the older adult population in the US. In 2010, people of color made up 20% of the nation's total 65 and older demographic, a figure that will more than double by 2050. Advocates and aging service providers say LGBTQIA+ older adults and older adults of color face significant disparities in health and healthcare access, economic security, housing, employment, community support, and more. It's important that our creative aging work address these inequalities and that we ensure that arts programming is accessible for the full span of diverse older adults and is responsive to their needs. We want to also address a question that often comes up about terminology with regards to creative aging program participants. At Lifetime, we use the term older adults to denote the 55 and better folks that these programs are designed for. We find that this term, as opposed to seniors or elderly, is a wider term for all the kinds of people encompassed in this work and is often preferable to the students themselves. Who knew? But be sure to ask the folks you work with, how do they want to be referred to, besides, of course, their own names? People have personal opinions about the best word to describe them and their age. And there are also cultural differences about these terms. We also see people use the terminology 55+ or 55 and better to denote who the class is targeted for. And the term creative aging can be used to indicate without having to spell out a specific age. So what exactly is creative aging? We define creative aging as professionally led instructional arts programs that build skills over time across all the arts disciplines. In short, It is arts education for older adults. Creative aging is not just a concept, but also an emerging field in which a variety of organizations are starting to provide meaningful opportunities for creative expression through visual, literary, and performing arts programming. These activities are based on scientific research and emphasize the factors crucial for positive aging: learning skills and building social connections. For this training, we want to clarify from the beginning the particular kind of creative aging program we're going to be discussing. Lifetime Arts' focus is on arts education programs for older adults. Now, there is extraordinary work happening in creative aging in the arts therapies. Much of this work happens in clinical or skilled nursing settings. Although both kinds of programs have incredible benefits to the participant, the goals of creative aging arts education programs are different from therapeutic programs. The therapeutic programs use arts modalities and creative processes to promote wellness, recovery, and rehabilitation through unique personal interactions. Creative aging arts education programs are instructional arts programs that focus on the older adults as art makers and art learners. The creative aging arts education model was in part developed from this creativity and aging study. This study proves that arts engagement is especially good for older adults. Dr. Gene Cohen led the creativity and aging study out of George Washington University in 2006. The study was done over 3 years in New York City, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. In each site, there was a control group of older adults ages 65 to 103 who did their usual activities, and an intervention group who participated in professionally conducted art and cultural programs. There were 50 participants in both the control and intervention groups in all 3 sites. Both groups were matched well in terms of functioning at the start of the study. There was an expected decline in this age group. However, instead, the study produced these results. Those in the intervention group used less medication, had fewer doctor visits, had less depression, and overall became much more engaged and active in their lives. Cohen and others have discovered that the aging brain is far more plastic than previously believed, and that structured learning, especially through the arts, can improve cognitive functioning and enhance the quality of life. Dr. Cohen identified the 2 most important components of a creative aging arts education program. No matter how it's delivered, in person, online, or other alternative format, creative aging programs need to include these 2 main goals. 1, developing mastery of an art form. And 2, forming community through the art-making process and the art-making experience. To define further, mastery of skills is learning an art form in depth and having the opportunity to practice the art and become better at it over time. Social engagement and building community between participants should be connected to the art making and learning. Because of COVID, most older adult programming moved to virtual platforms. But it is important to understand the in-person class model. And tomorrow, we'll spend time thinking about how to adapt the in-person classes to virtual and remote formats. A creative aging arts education program has the following components. It is an art class, visual, performing, literary, or music, that is taught by a professional teaching artist, skilled in developing a sequential arts curriculum. This is a paid professional arts educator, not a volunteer. The classes should be at least 8 sessions and is held in sequential weeks, usually once a week. Why? because the class is sequential in nature. One skill will build upon the other, and the learning and practice of the skills will grow over time. Each class should be a minimum of 90 minutes to ensure that there's plenty of time to practice the skills taught and have time for the reflection and feedback processes that allow for intentional social engagement opportunities connected to the art making. There will also be, or should be, a planned culminating event that will be a celebration of the work created over the 8+ weeks, and that'll be shared with other community members. The goal is to have at least 10 people in each class. However, the exact number of maximum students will depend upon the art form and should be determined with the input of the teaching artist. Registration is required in creative aging arts education classes to build buy-in and commitment from the students to return from week to week. The classes can be free or fee-based depending on the organization and their needs. We should note that if taking place in libraries, programs will generally be free to participants. The class will meet at the same time in the same place every week. The expectation and the goal is that students will come to every class. Of course, things come up and people get sick, but the goal is that the same group of students will come week after week. Again, this is what the model looks like when people can meet in person. And we're going to go over in detail tomorrow how to adapt this to remote formats.
Great, thank you, Clark. We're going to take a little 2020 break. We're trying to model things here in our training that really are best practices for working remotely, especially with older adults. So a 2020 break, the idea is that for every 20 minutes, you're on a Zoom program of any kind, that you take a 20-second break and you look at something 20 feet away. You actually move your gaze to give your eyes a break to something 20 feet away. I'm going to cheat a little bit. We're going to do a 30-second, so a 20-30 break. But go ahead and sit comfortably where you are. But if you have a window, that would be ideal to refocus your eyes at something 20 feet away. If you don't have a window, whatever is the furthest distance that your eyes can focus on something. So for me, I see a leaf sort of fluttering in the breeze. I'm going to just capture that object with my eyes. Don't need to stare, it can be an easy gaze, but you're just trying to let your eyes sort of refocus at a distance away from you. And we're just going to breathe normally, and I'm going to give us a nice 30 seconds. Really try to keep your eyes on that object or at that distance and don't look back to your screen. It's very tempting, but I'm going to give you a nice 30 seconds just to breathe normally and refocus your gaze. Just breathing normally, taking in this object, really letting your eyes take it in and settle on it. Relax your face. Relax your bum into your chair. There it was. That was our brief little break. Something good to remember. It can be that easy just to give your eyes a little break from the screen. Hard to remember to do, but once you do it, quite easy and a good relaxation for your eyes. Great. So when we are developing creative aging programs, we want to be sensitive to the ways in which adults learn best. So I'm going to ask you all, is there something, and I'm just going to put into gallery so I can see everybody, something new that you've been learning or studying as an adult? Maybe you want to put something into the chat or raise your hands. Because I want to ask you, think about this thing you've been learning anew. How do you feel like learning is different for you as an adult? How do you feel when you're thinking about this thing you've been learning? How do you feel like you learned best as an adult that might be different than when you were a kid? So Tracy here said language. Tracy, I don't know if you wanted to answer that. You can raise your hand real quick. See, it takes more discipline. Oh, that's interesting, Tracy. Yeah. You feel like you want to talk, if you wanted to unmute yourself and say anything more.
That's really it, that it takes more discipline. I have to focus, be very intentional about my concentration, turn the TV off, turn the phone off, ignore who's texting. So yeah.
I think as adults, we have many more distractions, right, than maybe we did as kids. I really watch my 2-year-old and I really am jealous that she can just focus in on her painting and there's really nothing else she has to do in that moment, right? So for sure. Great, I see time management has come up. Joanne says, I think I learn faster now because I am more practiced at knowing how I learn. Interesting. Yep, working with the new art medium, it's captivating because I chose to learn it. Stephanie, can you unmute yourself and speak more about that? Sorry, where's Stephanie? You chose to learn it. Oh, Stephanie, you're muted, my friend.
Stephanie.
There we go.
I'm a materials geek to begin with. So any kind of material, I love to always be finding new things to work with. But about 2 years ago, I started really playing with a different type of painting material and combining it with other things. And because of that, and I think partially because I chose to learn it, because I was also at the same time kind of transitioning away from a more kind of administrative managerial position back into making my own fine art, I found the level of engagement was much higher. Just across
your own level of engagement, you felt?
Yes, yes.
Cool. Michael said, thank you for sharing. Michael said that my media of choice, cardboard, is pretty new. Michael, do you want to talk about learning this new media as an adult? Sorry, can you unmute yourself, Michael? Apologies.
Ta-da.
Thanks.
Wait. Hey. Yeah. My sense of recycling, my sense of what I see as my materials has really been heightened. I mean, I'm pushing myself I don't throw anything out unless I absolutely have to throw it out. And even then, looking at the garbage, getting stuff into the garbage, I'll see something, I say, whoa, no, I want to save that. Let's pick that out or make something out of that. So my sense, I guess it is, of looking and understanding what I work with, how I'm working with it. That's all really been heightened by working with what is normally considered a very mundane material, cardboard. It's really anything but that. I love it. I love working in cardboard.
Cool, cool. I love how it's uncovering a new medium is sort of helping you rediscover your artistic practice.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
That's great. We have some other folks that had some great comments. Joanna, it was Catherine who said she's learning how to play spike ball and finds that she's just as klutzy as she was as a kid, no more, no less. So sometimes things don't change, right? Let's see, analogies to what I already know do make it easier to learn something. It's like when you think this is similar, great. So already having a lifetime of learning, right, makes you, maybe you have a little bit more confidence, you understand your own processes around learning and the way in which you best want to learn. Catherine said, I just finished a nonfiction book. I realized I can handle the process much more easily than I could on my first nonfiction book because I learned from my mistakes, right? So a lifetime of making mistakes and learning. And John says, letting go of delegating some aspects of activities. I think that's really important, doing what you really want to do and maybe being able to delegate or not focus as much as on the other elements. So these are all really important. I want us to think about some of these things are typically known as characteristics of adult learners, and older adult learner, of course, part of that group. We can go ahead and show the slides, Galia. So these are some things that already, all we're mentioning. These are some characteristics of adult learners, and older adults are part of that. As learners, we really want to keep these things in mind where we're designing creative aging classes. So, sorry, and let me know if you're having any audio weirdness with my headphones. I am having some static.
I'm gonna mention, Julie, you're clicking a little bit through these slides.
Okay. I'm gonna make the transition in just a moment.
Do you want me
Sorry
to take
about
the
that.
slide, Julie, as you get adjusted?
It's going to take me just a second. Sure, go ahead, Annie.
Okay, great. Yeah, so some of these kind of similar attributes to adult learners, and this is all adult learners, and how Julie mentioned that older adults are part of this. So some of these things, and you all already started to mention this in your kind of the way you learn best. There's this idea that older adults are autonomous and self-directed. You mentioned that you chose to study something. So these creative aging classes, you know, the folks choose to be in them. They're not placed in them. It's a real shift in terms of senior programming that sometimes, oh, we'll just start a crafts project and people, you know, in the, you know, I don't know, community room space, they'll participate. These are really chosen activities to do. So some folks will like them, some folks won't like them. The people that do sign up really want to be there and have an interest in it, because that will engage them in the learning itself. Because older adults will vote with their feet, and they have very specific goals of what they want to accomplish. They don't have to be there, and they will leave the class or just not come back if the class doesn't look what, you know, doesn't match what they're looking for. And that's okay. That's actually encouraged. It's like you want the learners to be in the space because they're really driven to learn it. Because adults are goal oriented. They come in with the attitude of, if not now, when? And they're really serious about it and have a clear idea about what they want to learn and how they want to learn it. So they're practical. They want information, and along with having clear goals, they want to use what they are learning and become better at it as they learn. And they want to successfully apply what they're learning to other attributes in their life.
Thanks, Annie. A great example of that is an older adult I knew who wanted to take a guitar class, and she was very clear the first day with I think the guitar teacher, you know, was going to teach her some jazz guitar. She was all about that, but she also said, I also want to make sure that I can play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star to sing along with my 7-year-old grandchild. That's not always going to be, you know, the specific case, but it's just an example of she knew what she wanted to learn. She was willing to learn other things, but she also had this one goal that she was really key on accomplishing. And the teacher needed to respect that and work with what she was looking for. And then also, you know, expand her horizons artistically as well. So there's also no getting around the fact that we're all aging. And while of course we want to assume ability, there are going to be just naturally some issues that are going to, you know, happen with more frequency as people age. It's important to note that these are natural changes and to be prepared to address them in your class design. And also important to know that often people are not going to volunteer this information. They're not necessarily going to come up to you the first day of class and say, you know, I have an issue with hearing. And there needs to be ways in which you proactively set up, you know, if you're in person, your class space so that everybody can see and hear as closely, you know, as well as possible. You need to think about this in terms of how handouts are designed, or through non-evasive assessments, which we're going to talk about in depth in a moment. These assessments are built inside of your class design so that you have moments where you can check in with everybody, and you might be able to notice, you know, Sally actually, I think, didn't hear that last direction. I need to make sure to adjust next time so that, you know, she can be sure to hear me, things like that. So these assessments might look differently when working online, and we're going to go into that. The natural process of aging also, of course, brings with it a series of losses. Spouses pass away, families move, friends might become more disconnected. The need to make new connections is really critical. Understandably, concerns about money are also going to, you know, often be present and pervade this time as well. But again, this isolation is really a huge problem. And it's this isolation element that really leads to what Ashton was talking about, anxiety. Anxiety being really, you know, in a lot of ways, more of an issue than even memory loss for older adults. It really is that anxiety that folks feel that is often related to a social isolation that happens. At the same time, we want to introduce this term here that's on the slide that's really used in the positive aging movement, and that's the term rewirement. So this is the idea that for some older adults, They might really rethink their hobbies and their interests as they grow older. They might go through a really deep process of reevaluating, what is important to them? How do they really want to spend their time? So older adulthood goes many ways. It might be a time that's fraught with, it can be with regret, with isolation, confusion, but it can also be a time that is of great opportunity and new adventures for learning. So creative aging really aims to help older adults experience aging as a positive process. So keeping a lot of these things in mind, these older adult learning principles in mind, when designing a creative aging program is really important. So at Lifetime, we use this acronym of SAFE to denote all the elements of a quality creative aging class and program that really utilizes these older adult learning principles. So these are the elements here on the slide. It's SAFE, and these elements are skills, assessment, feedback, and then engaging socially. So going more into these, and all this information is going to be available for you in a PDF form in the Lifetime Arts portal, which we'll talk more about later. But just to go into these, so skills first is just the idea of, skill building, art skill building as part of the program and part of every class. And this idea too, that Clark was speaking about earlier, which is that one skill really builds to the next skill. This is the sequential skill building, experiential skill building. So a program ideally has a well-designed scaffold. There's an arc of the workshop series where the skills are built in a really logical way, which will allow students to understand how one skill leads to the next and leads to the next. And it overall contributes to their own artistic literacy and competency, and is really going to be the foundation in which students begin to see themselves as artists. Next is this assessment piece. So this is what I was just talking about, which is the idea that you as the teaching artist need to evaluate your students all the time so that you can tailor your instruction to match the needs of the learners. These are generally, creative aging classes are generally community-based classes. They should be barrier-free. Anyone should be welcome to join. So this is going to mean that you're going to have a real diversity of entry points and experience with the art form in your class. You're going to have folks that this is the first, painting class they've ever taken. You might have people that are extremely experienced in that art form. So it's going to be really vast among your class. So you need to find these moments, ideally within the class itself, so that you can assess how each student learns and what best approaches might be for each learner and how you might adjust your classes going forward. Tomorrow in our online creative aging classes you're going to actually take, we'll talk about some ways in which to build these sort of assessment moments. Next is feedback, and this element can be very different for those of you that maybe tend to work more in a K through 12 environment. Feedback is a really important part of creative aging classes and really any adult arts class. It's the idea that there's going to be processes within the class where there are opportunities for students to speak about each other's work. So feedback strategies, vary from teaching artist to teaching artist, but the goal is that the student artists can really grow in their learning from the feedback from the entire class rather than just getting feedback from the teaching artist. And also, of course, this includes certain protocols that need to be set up. So feedback is always supportive and not just, tearing you down with critique. So Gali has put a link into the chat of the Liz Lerman feedback protocol, which is a great model to use when instructing your students on how to give positive feedback. And finally, that's that really important engaging socially. So this is this idea Clark was talking about earlier, which is intentional social engagement that's tied to the art making. So it's not just cookies and coffee after the class, which I'll say can be a very important part of class, but it's not just that. The idea actually is that you as the teaching artist are going to create opportunities for students to engage socially with each other through activities that are connected to the art making and connected to the skills that they're learning and practicing. So again, we'll go into a little bit more of that tomorrow, but I'm sure you're already thinking, what are the activities inside of your art form that can really allow students to ideally collaborate together artistically, to give feedback to each other about the work in a way that forms more social bonds, maybe speak about professional work in a way that really connects them socially. So creative aging classes are definitely modeled after the K through 12 class structure. This is a suggested, structure right here for a class. It's a good model to use. You might organize your class in a different way, but this is the idea that, in this class here, all those safe planning components are met. So we have the warm-up is an opportunity for you as the teaching artist to assess your students. It's also could be an opportunity for folks to learn each other's names, get to know each other a little bit better. Then you're going to move into the skill building portion of the class where you're focusing on what you're teaching folks that day. They're having an opportunity to practice that. Maybe they're sharing their work next, which is an opportunity for that feedback moment, also engaging them socially. They'll then have a moment of reflection on what they learned in the class that day. That's another great opportunity for you as the teaching artist to assess where folks are. And finally, a closing, which ideally is another assessment moment, another moment for everybody to connect socially at the end of the class. So some facilitation ideas, we want to definitely keep in mind older adult learning principles when just in general facilitation. It's really important. We often recommend, you're going to demonstrate artistic techniques. You might show professional work as an example of the skill that you're, sharing for that class. But it's really important that creative aging classes are not lecture classes. The majority of the class really should be spent in everybody getting to practice the skills and make art, right? It's really not a lecture series. So this is going to involve a lot of input from your students. So again, as a teaching artist, of course, you come in with a plan. As I know many of you know, you need to be flexible with that plan, right? You need to constantly check in and assess your students and maybe adjust the plans based on the students' needs. That might mean you actually stay longer in one lane. It might mean you move to something new faster than you had planned. You really need to be open to making those adjustments. The learning environment in a creative aging class is much more of students partnering with the teacher. This is different than K through 12, where, much more of sort of a class manager, management duties. This is really about being in partnership with your students, learning together, adjusting based on what you're learning from your students. And again, there needs to be plenty of time to practice new skills. It's really important to have this moment of practicing, of trying, maybe failing, trying again, right? We were discussing that earlier. And this is not something that can happen with just sort of occasional engagement with art making. The idea really needs to be this sequential, in-depth art making. And it's the sequential, in-depth art making that has those positive effects on the brain that we were talking about earlier in the creativity and aging study. So tomorrow we're going to talk about how do we adapt these things for a remote format. I'm sure some of you are already working remotely and you're starting to figure out, well, it's been a year now, we've all been sort of working remotely, but so you've maybe already started to address some of these things, but it's definitely different to try to do, complete some of these sort of principles we're talking about when you're working remotely. For instance, for skills, it can be difficult to ensure that that skill building is really happening. So think about, when you're working online, what are some ways that skill building and really practicing those skills can really happen in an online or remote delivery program, whether that be over the phone, which we'll talk about tomorrow as well. Assessment, in a class in person, say it's a drawing class, you can walk around while people are working, you can have one-on-one conversations, you can see everybody's work, everyone's drawing. This is a lot harder to do when you're working online, when we're in these, Zoom boxes, say. So how can you make sure you're still assessing your students, getting some feedback from them about where they're at, what's working, not working, and meeting their individual learning needs? In an online format, in terms of feedback, it can be really difficult for everybody to be able to see or hear each other's work, to be able to really accurately give positive, good feedback. So how can you as the teaching artist facilitate opportunities for feedback even when working online or over the phone? And finally, as we all know, connecting with each other and really building some real relationships can be challenging over Zoom or over the phone. So how can you support that social engagement piece even when you're working remotely? We'll give you some suggestions tomorrow, but just things to start to think about. So here's an example of a teaching artist. This is John Leo Nim. He's a Brooklyn Arts Council teaching artist. He was 1 month into teaching clown and comedy skills to older adults at the Jewish Community Center of Greater Coney Island when the senior center closed. This was last year due to COVID-19. So he had to really quickly adjust his in-person model. And this might illustrate some of those adaptations to move online. So he adjusted his curriculum to the new format of Zoom. He had folks do physical warm-ups together, following each other on their web cameras. And in this way, he could assess how each student was doing that day, who might need some special attention or help. He was also really upfront that this was an experiment. He collected a lot of feedback over the course of the session. Could everyone see? Could everyone hear? What's working, not working? So in this way, this was another direct assessment of how everybody was doing. And one assignment he had everybody do, which I kind of love, is he had, since everybody was working, calling into the class from home, he had everybody choose an object in their home, and then he sort of ranted, had each person rant as that object. So they chose, a pack of playing cards or the couch or their slippers, and then they monologued as that object. So it was a great exercise in sort of clown and comedy, but it also, really allowed each participant to fully express what life was like for them in quarantine. So it was an assessment for John of where everybody was, in terms of their skills, but it was also a social engagement activity as well. So also intergenerational and multi-generational programs. These are really exciting opportunities for younger and older students to generate artwork together. Alive and Kickin' is a touring vocal ensemble of older adults who rock, they call themselves, collaborated with Stages Theater Company, which is an educational theater program for children and youth. And this was all in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in the Twin Cities. And they created an intergenerational music program called Peace for the Ages. COVID-19, of course, forced them to reconsider how they were going to do this culminating performance when an in-person performance didn't make sense anymore. So they produced a performance video, and that's a picture of it here on the slide, to really retain that connection between their students and really give them a sense of collective accomplishment. Later, they actually did repeat the performance outdoors, all masked and with shields, under safe COVID protocols. But this is just proof that, intergenerational projects really can still happen successfully under the pandemic with a lot of creative thinking. So we just want to take a moment real quick to just call out some further design best practices to keep in mind if you're considering, teaching an intergenerational or multi-generational class. You're going to want to think about how both the younger students and the older students' learning needs are being met, and making sure that both groups are really equitable in their sharing and in their art making. So the first goal of multi-generational work is to really create the deeper community connections. So in this case, the social engagement focus really comes first. This is building the connections between the generations. Shared learning also needs to happen in both directions. There really needs to be equal opportunities for both groups to take risks. And so what's important is that both groups feel involved in the creative process and any creative decisions that are being made, that there's really, there's an equitable conversation with both sides. These programs really need to be designed with accessibility in mind for both groups. So they need to be barrier-free for both groups. This can be complex. One way that this can show up a lot is just purely in the logistics of session timing. So sometimes these programs can happen during school, often they're after school programs. So after school is what works for youth, but then we often don't want to get too late in the day for the older adult participants. So you end up being in a sort of 3 to 5 p.m. time range. It can get just that part, making sure that the timing really works great for both parts, both groups, can be challenging. We want to make sure that everything is accessible for older students and for young students. So that makes sure that there's, maybe listening devices if needed, that any printouts are, large print. Make sure that there's equal support for the tech platforms if you wanted to do this program online. And finally, a really, important goal I feel of these kinds of programs is really to address that ageism piece that we were talking about earlier, but in both directions. So older folks have stereotypes about younger folks have stereotypes about older folks. So how can you use the project to really dismantle, those ageist beliefs, really go right at them and talk about them. And the best way too then is to really create together, to make sure that everybody's seeing each other equally as an artist and a creator, and that can really break down those stereotypes. All right, folks, it was a lot of PowerPointing. I also see that we had a lot of questions in the chat. Now is our moment for questions, discussions about anything that we went over today. Let's see.
Julie, I just might call out too that Joanna had a comment around the Liz Lerman's critical response process.
Right.
I think it's a fantastic tool. I think it's a great tool to use as a guide, but I really encourage also, you could use it directly as is, but you could also use it as a guide to create your own sort of critical response protocol. So tomorrow when we move through our demo classes, when you get to the feedback portions, really think about how do you make opportunities for feedback in your class, and what are the things that you could share with other folks? Because what I'll continue to encourage is that this is a platform where we have some things to offer all of you, but we're really looking to you to offer each other your tips and tricks and insights that you've learned along the way, and particularly during your demo class, that'll be a good time to share some things that have worked in your own classes.
Cool, thanks, Annie. Great, and Joanna's saying that she used the Liz Lerman method of critical response for high school playwrights working in ensemble. That's great, I built it from there. Yeah, I mean, I think that other element of the protocols is to develop them with your students, right? Start with some, here's what I'm thinking, what else would make this a safe space for you? To speak about your work. That's another idea of being really in partnership with your older adult students. So we went over a lot of things today. We talked about the model. We talked about, society as a whole aging. We talked about the SAFE principles. We talked about older adult learning principles. We talked about multi-generational programs. So in all of that, any questions? Great. So Linda says, is the 8-week length hard and fast? As a woman with multi-generational family caregiving responsibilities, plus a business to run, I find it difficult to commit to 4 weeks, let alone 8. Valid. Can you talk about your experience with scheduling classes that are realistically available to the widest range of learners? Really great question. We're balancing, and Annie, I welcome your contribution too, but I would say we're balancing a lot of different things in saying 8 weeks. Understandable that some people might not be able to commit for that amount of time. However, to really accomplish this sort of sequential model and the idea of really building skills over time, and honestly, building the social connections is something that really takes time. Something I sometimes talk about is sort of the rule of threes, or not in the way rule of threes in like screenwriting, but the idea that a program is sort of in 3 chunks. Very often the first couple weeks, people are coming in and out. Say I'm doing a theater program. Very often the first third of the program, people, some people come try it out, some people don't come back. We're doing a lot of get to know you exercises. Things are a little bit fluid and permeable. That second third, we sort of really close our ensemble. And now this is the group, and this is the group that we're going to keep working with. And the last third is getting ready to show the work. So what I would say about why a full 8 weeks is because there is sort of can be a kind of flexible moment at the beginning for the first couple weeks, and then the group really solidifies, and then you can really go deeper, and then you can really build those social interactions. To me, anything less than 8 weeks, you're just going to truncate that process, and you're actually not going to go as deeply. I think it's always reasonable, and this is something we all as teaching artists, especially in creative aging, deal with all the time, that people do come in and out, that people do have to miss occasionally. I mean, that's, we can't make people sign on the dotted line that they're going to be there every day. Of course, there needs to be flexibility all the time, even more so in creative aging classes. But I think asking the participants to attempt to put this into their lives once a week, 8 weeks, just for this period, is also really asking for their dedication to their own learning process, and just feels very key. I think that often people are hesitant to sign up, and then after they go through 8 weeks, they want 8 more. So I think there's also a perception thing sometimes around like, I can't commit. I mean, I'm very bad at committing, so I do that more than anybody. But we want to give the space for that time.
Julie, I just might add on too, it's one model. 8 weeks is a goal to get to the social, skills mastery goals that creative aging classes, are striving to create. There are lots of models, and this is not a either or, it's more and more. You know what I mean? Like there's a great place and space for drop-in programming. There's a great space for shorter programming. I think as sort of a creative aging advocate, we're just saying to organizations across the country that a whole arts residency model we have seen across the platforms and across organizations can be very successful once folks get used to it. So it's not really an either or. A lot of folks start with shorter programming, often because of financial sort of limitations, and they can't afford to do an 8-week program, but so they'll start with 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And then like Julie said, then people who've done the 3 or 4 weeks are like, we want to do that again, or maybe we can do 8 weeks. And then, so your older adults yourselves will tell you what they want and what works for them. So there's sort of like the gold medal goal. And then there's all the places in between that, at the end of the day, the important piece is that you're bringing older folks together as learners and art makers and starting to build community.
That's great. Thank you. Stephanie had another comment on this. I found people are sometimes hesitant to sign up for whole 8 weeks. I'm working with an arts agency right now with a few classes where we broke the learning into 2 3 to 4 week sessions. We found that it works for schedules and still builds continuity. That's definitely an option. And Ashley just had another question related to this topic. Does 8 weeks seem to be the best maximum length for creative aging programs? And I would say a little bit the sky's the limit. I mean, we know of some classes that run, this is a long-term writing group, but basically runs from September to May. I think they do every other week, so it's twice a month. That's a model for people that are really dedicated to it's a memoir writing class. Often they're more like 3 months classes. So no, I mean, we get really specific because we're often training folks that have never worked in a model like this at all, like Annie said, or used to drop-in programs. So we say, think about 8 because that's kind of a nice number. It's a good goal. Great. And I know that we had a question, Joanna. I'd like to explore more social engagement as related to the teaching. I've had experiences leading groups where an opening warm-up question of the day is great to build conversation that can end up taking over the class period. So we miss the skill building time. How best to incorporate it into the instructional plan? Really great question, Joanna. It'll be great for tomorrow when, me and Clark will be teaching these classes and we can talk more about it and you'll see some examples. Very, very important. Often I find with older adults, many do have a lot to share, and it's important to make sure everybody has, a moment to share. For me, I do an initial warm up that is, a name and a gesture, that is very contained structurally so that everybody gets a chance to share something pretty quick at the beginning so we can move into going deeper. And maybe later there might be a moment where we can speak a little bit more at length. But I think your point's really important in terms of setting some boundaries at the beginning to make sure that everybody gets to share. So, and there might be a lot of different unique ways to, social engagement doesn't necessarily have to be, everybody goes around and says something. It could be you're in groups and you're working on a partner project or a collaborative art piece. It doesn't have to be everybody, because some people also don't necessarily want to share in a talky way. They might want to do something more, with other people on the page or collaborate in a different way. So those are some thoughts there. And Clark, jump in at all if you have any thoughts on that too.
I was just wondering about if you have to compromise because people aren't ready to commit for 8 weeks, or the teaching artist has an issue with that, about twice a week for 4 weeks.
Yeah, that's could definitely be another option. You know, we often encourage a lot of these programs are working in partnership with an organization, and we'll talk about that, I think, on day 3. So a lot of the scheduling things, you're going to be reliant on your partner organization to survey what folks can really do, you know, and is 2 times a week an option for folks, you know. If you're working just independently on your own, of course, that's going to be up to you. And possibly also surveying your potential participants to see would that kind of schedule even work. I don't know that there's so much you would sacrifice in that model. It's a little bit more of an intense experience, maybe. I wanted to get to Benjamin said, I design community into the work, include the goals of the experience in the marketing and pre-program interview. That's very cool. Definitely that marketing piece of being really honest about why this is 8 weeks, why we're asking for this dedication, you know, would be important. And again, if you're working with a partnering organization, you would work together on that marketing language. The pre-program interview is really interesting. We don't always recommend that. Sometimes, you know, sometimes there might be more like a first open class or a first orientation. So you're not committing yet to the 8 weeks, but you're coming to get some information. And then maybe from there you commit to the 8 weeks. That's something that we find very common. Anybody else? Any last questions? All right, we have got 2 more days together, so that's totally fine. Save the questions for tomorrow and the next day. But I did want to make sure we go over our homework. We do have some homework, and Nagalia is going to show us about the portal as well. But first, our homework. Oh yeah, go ahead, Galia. Yeah, no, go ahead. Then I'll take.
Okay, sorry about that. So here is our Lifetime Arts portal. Many of you had to access the portal to join the call today. So as you know, you'll come to this welcome screen, you'll scroll down, you'll log in. This is where you'll access the Zoom links, but also all of the resources from the sessions and also your homework assignments. And so you can access all of these by day through these links, but you can also just scroll down if you prefer and just sort of scroll through all of the materials, and all of the links that we've posted in the chat and I've referenced along the way will also be here in the portal. Any studies or PDFs, videos, you can find them here. So.
Fabulous. And maybe, let's see, maybe Galia, you could put David's direct email. If anybody had any issues accessing the portal, we will put an email directly of our program coordinator who can help you with that. But ideally, you were able to access that. Your homework there is in the portal. We're going to have you review a couple of documents. One is a document of recommendations Lifetime Arts has developed about how to adapt that in-person design to remote delivery. There also is the document I mentioned earlier that goes over all of those safe elements, so you have that to review. There's a short film called Creative Aging In-Person to Online that really goes in depth, showing a couple of classes that have successfully moved from in-person to online during COVID. And then we have a link to our blog, a campaign where we highlighted folks last year that, again, we're going from in-person programs to online, just so you can get a sense of sort of the breadth of different organizations that really were able to do this successfully with their older adults. Just a reminder about tomorrow, we are going to start in these we're going to start all together, but then we're basically immediately going to go to breakout rooms to take these demo classes, which Clark and I are going to lead. Definitely have a couple of sheets of blank paper or a notebook for writing. Writing utensil, a pen or a pencil for tomorrow, and just be ready to join right in. Clark, if you want to just take a couple seconds, we're at time, but just to lead us through a closing moment, that would be great.
Sure. If people just want to throw into the chat one word that they feel does a good job of expressing to what they got out of today's programming, or what they want more of or didn't get.
Great, I put in.
Community, Annie, flexibility, Gary, engagement, Stephanie, celebrating, Ashley, support, humanity. Thank you, Benjamin. All right, it's new. All right, good to hear that. enlightening engagement, a lot of ideas. Excellent. All right. So thankful to have you guys today, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.
Thank you all so much.
Questions or anything you need to talk about, stay in touch.